Now, when we're talking about positive and negative punishment, again, we're not talking about, the aspect of the consequence that's attached to it, whether it be positive or negative. What we're talking about is either giving something or taking it away. So if it's a positive punishment, that means we are giving a negative consequence to cause a decrease in the behavior. So anytime we're presenting a punishment, okay, we're trying to stop a behavior from happening. If we're giving a reinforcement, we're trying to get that to continue. Think back to when I would give you guys candy when you would participate in class. That's a reinforcer because it makes it more likely that if you know you're going to get candy, you'll be more likely to participate in class. With punishments, you're always going for a decrease in the behavior, okay? You want it to stop. So in a positive punishment, we're attempting to decrease behavior by giving a negative consequence. So, for example, miss a curfew, get yelled at. Let's say your parents sit there and they lecture you for 45 minutes. That's not exactly a lot of fun, okay? It's kind of annoying. So that's giving a negative consequence. Another example would be talking back to a teacher and getting a detention. Okay, you're receiving, you're being given, hence the positive part of that, it's adding a detention, and that's a negative. Okay, most people don't like detentions. It's kind of weird if you do. You rob a bank, you go to jail. That is a negative consequence. Okay, so these are all examples of positive punishment. Negative punishment, on the other hand, you're still attempting to decrease the behavior because it is a punishment, but you are taking away or removing or subtracting, hence the negative, a positive consequence. Okay, and I told you this stuff was going to get kind of confusing. So let's say, again, we use the example of missing curfew, but instead of getting yelled at, what happens in negative punishment is they remove your car privileges. Okay, you lose the ability to drive yourself anywhere. Okay, so you're taking away a positive. Let's say you break the speed limit. Okay, you lose money because of a ticket. Okay, we would perceive that as kind of being positive punishment. Speed, get a ticket. That's a negative thing. But really what's happening is you're taking away the positive of your money. Okay, we like our money. Money is good. So you're losing out on your money, and that's why it would be considered a negative punishment. Let's say, for example, you talk on your phone too long, and so you rack up your family's minutes, and they end up spending like a whole lot of money on your cell phone bill for that month. They take your phone away instead. Okay, so you're removing a positive consequence in these scenarios. For example, one of the things that happened this year, there was a situation where one of my classes was particularly disrespectful while I was out one day for a doctor's appointment. As a result, I took negative punishment and implemented that. They were not able to do the blind walk activity that we all did this year because they didn't act appropriately. I wanted to decrease that disrespectful behavior. So what I did was I took away the positive consequence of being able to do the blind walk. So instead of them being able to have fun and do that activity, they ended up having to do something else, and they had no opportunity to carry out the blind walk. So these are examples of punishment. So let's break this down then one more time and make sure that we're all on the same page. Positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement. Their direction of their behavior in terms of increasing or decreasing, since it is a reinforcement for both, it will always go up. Okay? You are trying to increase that behavior. The consequence that's attached to it, though, is that you are giving a positive. So positive reinforcement is adding, so plus a plus. That's it. You're adding a positive. Negative reinforcement, as I said, they're going to increase a behavior, but it's because you're taking away a negative experience or consequence. Okay, so you're removing that. Think back to the chapstick and the gum and the Advil. Now, positive punishment and negative punishment, since they're punishments, the direction of the behavior, you're trying to decrease it. Where positive punishment is concerned, the consequence that's attached is that you are giving a negative. And in negative punishment, the direction of the behavior is to decrease, but it's because you are taking away a positive. okay? And I'm going to make sure that we do some activities with this in class so you can see further examples and be able to differentiate between these 4 types. But to add insult to injury, we've also got to talk about types of reinforcers and punishers out there. Remember, a reinforcer is anything that is going to cause a behavior to increase, and a punisher is anything that is going to cause a behavior to decrease. The issue at hand, though, is that you have primary and secondary reinforcers and punishers. So if something is a primary reinforcer or punisher, it's an unlearned or natural item that you naturally respond to. So for a primary reinforcer, it's going to fulfill some kind of biological need. So examples of this would be food, or water, or air, or shelter. These fulfill natural, instinctual needs that you have. So that's why they're considered to be primary reinforcers. Primary punishers, on the other hand, they're going to deal with things like, again, biological aspects, but it's things like pain or extreme heat or cold. Nobody likes to be really, really hot or really, really cold. Okay, those are not pleasant experiences. The goal, obviously, is that you avoid the behaviors that put you in those scenarios in the first place. You decrease those behaviors. But because these are, natural biological aspects, that's why they are primary, okay? First and foremost, you naturally respond to these. Now, on the other hand, you have secondary reinforcers and punishers. Secondary means that there has been some classical conditioning attached to this. I told you this was going to get kind of confusing. In secondary reinforcers and punishers, the secondary part to this is that reinforcer and or punisher, it's a neutral thing that became a reinforcer or punisher because it was repeatedly paired with something else. So at the end of the day, really what you need to remember about a secondary reinforcer or punisher is that you learned to respond to it. It didn't naturally get a response from you, initially speaking. So a secondary reinforcer would be something like money. Think about it. I know a lot of us feel like, oh, well, that's kind of like a natural thing that I automatically respond to now. But money is just paper. If you went to Japan, the Japanese currency there isn't the dollar, it's the yen, okay? Y-E-N. So if you came home and, after your trip from Japan and you had all of this Japanese currency, you couldn't just drive up to a McDonald's and say, okay, I want a quarter pounder with cheese and try to pay them in yen. Doesn't work that way, okay? So that's why money is a secondary reinforcer. Another thing would be praise or respect, good grades, okay? You learn to respond to those things. You learn to associate an A+ with something really good that you like your parents saying good job or them paying attention to you, or your teachers giving you an acknowledgement in some manner. Another example would be gold stars. You learn to respond to those. They don't naturally provide you with anything until you've learned over time that it has this particular association to it. Okay, so secondary reinforcers and punishers are classically conditioned things that end up making you want to either increase behaviors or decrease behaviors. Secondary punishers, on the other hand, are criticism or scolding or fines. You learned to respond to these things. If you were, fined, if someone gave you a piece of paper because you got a parking ticket, that piece of paper, it doesn't get a natural response from you until you pair it with the fact that you're losing some money that goes along with it. Okay, and so once that happens, that fine, that piece of paper becomes a secondary punisher because you've learned to respond to that little sheet right there. Same thing for scolding and criticism, okay? You learn to respond to those because of the feelings that they evoke from you in the aftermath. So these are types of reinforcers here. But I want to go back one more time to this chart. It is absolutely critical that you star this for yourself and keep this in mind as we're going through and we're practicing this content together in class. This is the most simplified explanation of these 4 concepts. And I can't stress it enough that when we're talking about the positive and the negative parts of these things, when it's a reinforcement, the behavior is always going to increase or keep going, okay? It will continue to be carried out. And where punishment is concerned, the desired end goal is to stop or decrease that behavior. But when we're talking about positive versus negative, we're not talking about the consequence that's attached. We're talking about the action that is being carried out where that consequence is concerned. So positive means that we are giving or adding to something. And the negative means that we are removing something, whether that be good or bad. Okay? So hopefully this has been easy to follow, but obviously if you have any questions, just let me know.